Let's bring in Tracy Ford, owner of Ford Sports Performance, who's worked with football players of all levels, from youth football to the NFL. Tracy, I'm sure you've seen a lot over the years, but is there any way to describe the current landscape of college sports in the NIL era, from the athletes to schools, now agents also getting involved?
Yeah, I think it's it's a different world right now, but I think everybody has to be able to adapt to those things, and it's just a lot different, right? You see agents now getting involved with some of these kids. I'm used to having this conversation with agents when kids are typically maybe at the youngest a junior going to be a senior in going into college, so at least they're 20, 21 years old at that point. But now we have to have these conversations with these kids when they're 14 and 15 years old, right? So it's a lot different, but again, the different landscape of trying to keep the main thing, I think, is what's extremely important. Because, back in the day, the old school ways with agents, 9 times out of 10, is they are going to sign a player when they get out of college, typically 9 times out of 10 invest into their training for 3 months, their housing, their food, maybe a rental car and a stipend. Invest, quite anywhere from $20 to $25,000 into a student, into an athlete, and in hopes in return, and 3 months later, right, that they're going to, go to the NFL and get drafted and, take 3% of 840,000, right? So that return on investment is big. But now when we see what we're looking at is kids that, agents aren't investing in these kids at all, right? They're not doing anything to help them become better football players. But yet instead they are kind of rushing them and trying to get them into the portal, or force them into doing things that they don't necessarily, I think, don't want to do or don't realize they have to do. There's no credibility right now, right? NIL agents, they don't need any certifications, right? They don't need anything. It could be me, you, or your uncle or your cousin negotiating your NIL deal. And a lot of those times people don't understand the market, and a lot of the agents don't even understand kids at that age, that age 16 to 21. Even the top NFL agents might not know, because they're used to dealing with players that are 22 to 30 years old, right? These kids are still developing in their mind. They still don't really know what the real world is. So it's a very challenging time, I think, for student athletes and parents to kind of know what's real and what's not, and kind of who to believe and who not to believe. But again, that's the new landscape. And, it's just the thing of trying to just help navigate these young student athletes through it.
Listen, I've been critical of Damon Williams Jr., and I think a lot of Husky fans have gone through the ringer of emotions this past week, and they're kind of conflicted about how to view him. But it is also important to understand what you just said. These athletes, they're going through a lot. There's potentially a lot of money involved. And how crazy is it for the athletes themselves right now?
Well, I think it's really crazy, right? I think you go from a kid that's asking, $25 to $30 for gas money to having 20 to 30,000 in their account every single month, right? So I think it's very difficult right now for kids to actually realize how real this is, and the money is real. And I don't think the kids really have a true understanding of the value of a dollar as well right now, because they're just not used to it, right? So I think it's really crazy for athletes right now. But I think again, trying to do some things to shape and fix it and educate the kids, I think, is what's really needed right now, and to be able to understand, to keep their circle as tight as they can with the people that they know are vested in them for the right reasons. And that's 9 times out of 10 to have their best well-being at heart. And that's not what we're typically seeing right now either.
Yeah, and aside from those protections that they can do themselves, do you think there's anything else that could be done in order to protect these student athletes on a national level in terms of regulation, to kind of regulate the Wild West culture of current college sports?
Yeah, I absolutely think. I think one of the things for sure is just to be able to help navigate, putting some rules in place, right? I don't think, signing 3-year deals, right? Signing 4-year deals or something like that, very similar to the NFL, because, what it does, it not only protects, it also protects the player, right? Because on the flip side, you see a lot of kids that are entering the transfer portal. And trust me, not all those kids are entering because they want to. They are getting pushed into the transfer portal, right? So 9 times out of 10, what you have seen sometimes as well for these student athletes, and I think it's a little bit wrong, but I get it, in order to get the 4-star recruit, he might not even be the best player for your team, but he's going to look really good on your rankings, on your national recruiting rankings. So you want to get that 4-star recruit. However, that might not be a fit for their program. So they might pay the kid a lot of money to get there, but in the second year, they're going to drop his money and tell him to go in the portal. And that right there is crucial. So I think figuring out the best way, signing these kids to 3-year deals, right? Having a buyout clause also for these kids where they can't just, spend 1 year there and just say, I don't like it anymore and leave, right? That the opposing school now has to think about, before I take this kid, he has, X amount of money left still on his contract that I'm going to have to pay that he's obligated for. So I think it does two things. It protects the player as well. And it also protects the university. I think the other thing as well that I think that could and should be done is, the new GM role, right? There's GMs at different colleges now, but every coaching staff, when they bring in a new coaching, when the coach gets hired or fired or whatever that may be, they're bringing in the GM from their staff. And again, it gives a level of uncertainty to some of the players that are there, because, if the GM is hired by the university, right, now the head coach answers to the GM. Now that GM actually knows who's actually in that locker room, rather than a new face that comes in with the coaching staff with his mind is, hey, this team just went 1-9. I got to get all of these kids out in order to replace them with better kids. So I think that's going to reduce the mass exodus that you see when a lot of coaches get hired or fired or leave the other opportunities, because new GM comes in. Half the GMs right now are more so recruiting guys that were promoted into general manager positions, which they don't really have that type of experience. They're on the recruiting side. So putting them in the world of finance and management and basically running a business might not be their forte. They're used to finding the person with the best height, weight, and speed and saying, does that kid help my football team? So I think those things could definitely be able to help, on both sides, for the universities, for the players, and for the coaches as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I also believe there also should be a college football czar that oversees everything. And I'm certainly nominating you for that role based off of what you just said. You're also more on the performance side of things in general and day to day. But what advice would you give your athletes you're working with in terms of how to approach offers from schools and then deciding whether to answer or to enter the transfer portal or not?
I think always with all my approach with all of my student athletes is always, let's see what's the best fit for you, right? What is the best fit for you to become a better football player? What is the best program for you to develop? 9 times out of 10, what I always say is, hey, you need to make the strength staff, right? Because that's the guy that you're going to be spending the majority of your time with, more than probably your position coach, because they just see you, right? Football is really 4 months out of the year, and the rest of that year is spent probably with the strength and conditioning coach. So finding that guy that's going to be able to help you develop you is going to be able to help find the best fit for you. And as far as the portal, I'm probably the biggest advocate for telling kids to stay where they're at, because 9 times out of 10, kids do get bad advice. They think that I'm not playing right now and I should just leave, or somebody's paying me more money here, or this kid's getting paid this. And 9 times there's no public records for how much kids are making, right? So they don't really know. So 9 times out of 10, they should probably stick out where they're at, right? Or there's kids that enter the portal that, don't have very many snaps or played a semi-decent year, but they weren't, they don't have access to see what the transfer portal looks like from the coach's side, right? Where seeing what their PFF grade actually is to see if they actually have value in the portal, right? So just making sure that they do their due diligence before they jump in, because it can get lonely, right? It can get lonely in that portal. And a lot of kids do not get out of the portal because, they're looking for kids with snap counts, right? If you've been in college for 3 years and you've got 165 snaps on your resume, well, I don't know if another team is going to want to hire you to be on my team, right? So I just think that's the thing, is just being able to just analyze every situation and the fit and what makes you and gives you the best opportunity football wise will be able to help you make a great decision on where you should spend the next 2 to 4 years of your college career.
Finally, what do you make of the Damon Williams situation at UW? What's your best guess on how he's received at the school going forward?
Well, I think we've got to add a little bit of grace, right? I think one thing that people don't really understand is some of the contract in the language that is being written in some of these contracts, right? We see the big $4 million deal or $5 million deal, but a lot of that money is not guaranteed. There is a thing called revenue share, which is 100% guarantee that comes from the university. And then there's the thing that they call NIL, which are basically marketing advances that they cannot guarantee that they're going to get to. Now, do most universities get to that? Yeah. Have you seen stories of universities not paying players? Yeah. So when they cannot write it in those clauses that this money is guaranteed, well, for a student athlete that might have a lawyer look over that, it says $4 million, but you're only guaranteed $1 million, right? Or you're only guaranteed $800,000, and everything else is NIL opportunities, you might probably have that money allocated from some of the old school collectives of what they were paying people before the revenue share, but that money is not guaranteed. So in a case for a 19, 21, 20, these 20 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, when he says, hey, this deal is worth it's written as $4 million, but it's only 800,000 guaranteed because the rest of the money is NIL. Well, and there's another school saying, we've got all this money for you guaranteed because we're going to put it in rev share. I mean, it could change the perspective of that kid. And again, I think, they got it right. The University of Washington did a really good job of getting it right and making that work. So, but again, I have a little bit of empathy in that because I do see some of the language. So it might have been the language that was off, but it also might have been, people within his camp saying, hey, there's more money out there for you and let's go take it, But I think overall, he made a phenomenal decision to be able to kind of stick it out. Obviously, they worked it out. I know it was probably had something to do with from the economical standpoint, but they worked that out. And I think he's going to have a phenomenal career here with the Huskies. And, I can't wait to see him throw the ball at Husky Stadium.
Really appreciate your perspective, and he is no stranger to training some of the best NFL players that come through Seattle, from Bobby Wagner to Richard Sherman, KJ Wright as well. Tracy Ford of Ford Sports Performance in Tukwila. Check him out on social media at TFordFSP. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you.